Hello, thank you all for joining us today on this very sad day here at the zoo. Just to let you know who we have speaking, I've got two speakers for you today. The first is Dr. Doug Armstrong, and he's the Director of Animal Health, and then followed by Dan Cassidy, who is our General Curator. We can take questions at the very end if you do have any. And with that, I'm going to bring Dr. Doug Armstrong up.
Hello. At 9:50 today, we anesthetized our young male elephant, the one that most people recognize. It's named Warren. We immobilized him because we're going to make a mold of his tusk. He had progressively cracked his tusk, and we were concerned that the crack was progressing lengthwise and was going to get to the root canal. And then when that happens, the tusk gets infected, and it becomes a much more serious problem. So we're going to make a mold today of the tusk, and then cast a protective cap to put on it, because all the elephants have some cracks in their tusk, and they use their tusks to strip bark off trees, to move objects, and so we're going to put a protective cap on it so that he can continue to use his tusk without risking infection. We were surprised. About 20 minutes into the procedure, he developed difficult labored respiration, and then his respiration stopped. We instituted emergency procedures, but they were unsuccessful, and so the elephant died. We don't know the cause of death at this point. He was a young animal, so this was completely unexpected, but we'll conduct a necropsy, which is an autopsy on an animal, to determine the cause of death. It'll probably be some weeks before all the tissue can be examined and we can make some kind of a diagnosis as far as the cause of death, that there's nothing apparent initially.
Okay, and we'll save questions for the end.
Okay.
With that, Dan Cassidy, if you could join Dr. Doug Armstrong.
Dan Cassidy, C-A-S-S-I-D-Y, and I'm the General Curator. This is a really sad day for the staff and volunteers here at the zoo, and I'm sure the public, when they learn about it, as Warren was one of their favorites. As Doug said, this was totally unexpected, but working in this field is something that we have to deal with from time to time. But it's always more difficult when it's an animal that, particularly intelligent animal like the elephants, that you develop a strong relationship with, and especially one that had a lot of personality like this guy did. So today we did something a little bit different than what we would ordinarily do following a death. We closed the building to the public and opened it back up to the other elephants and gave them the opportunity to grieve. They came in. It was I've never seen anything like it in captivity. I have seen it in the wild. It does occur in the wild. Elephants come and grieve the death of their family members. And they all came in very quietly and stood around in an unusual fashion for them. Usually they're moving around a lot, making a lot of noise and everything. They were very quiet, and each one reached out in turn and touched Warren. So we gave them the opportunity for about an hour to grieve, and then we put them back outside. And I expect that over the next few days at least, they will come back to the site where Warren died and sniff around there as we see in the wild. Any questions for either one of us?
How common of a procedure was this today with this elephant? It's been done before, I'm sure.
Particularly with this elephant, we've immobilized him here previously. This is the elephant that, if you remember when they arrived, he had fractured his fibula. And so he'd been immobilized 4 times previously. 3 of those were over the course of the first year to examine the fibula and treat it. That joint got infected, so there was a course of treatment and then rechecks of x-rays. And then previously this summer in July, we immobilized him our initial attempt to deal with the cracks in the tusk was to remove because it cracks at the tip and they progress lengthwise. So we removed the cracks at the tip. He developed new cracks during August, and that's why we elected to take a different approach now, because our previous approach didn't work, and we were going to put a cap on it. So, and all of these elephants were immobilized multiple times in Swaziland for the capture and in crating for the transport. In the drug combination we've used, same combination. The one we use today, same combination we've used every time. So there was nothing new about that.
Can you talk a little bit more about what immobilizing entails, what you exactly do?
So when we talk about immobilizing an animal, we administer a tranquilizer and an anesthetic. So the tranquilizer calms the animal down. The anesthetic produces unconsciousness. So we want the animal unconscious. So it's very similar to anesthesia in people. The only thing that's a little more challenging with the animals that we work with is, if any of you have been anesthetized, you know they almost always start with putting a line in, and then the initial anesthetics always go intravenously. We don't have that option. So it was he was injected. Although it's interesting, he's over the year and a half he's been here, he's responded extremely well to training. So he was hand injected. He voluntarily took the injection, and then it took him about 20 minutes for the drugs to circulate through his system, and then he just sank to the ground and was out. And everything was going fine until about 20 minutes into the procedure, and then he developed respiratory problems.
I know he was one of 2 males that you have here, correct?
Correct.
So can you talk to, I know you've done a lot of investments and really trying to up your breeding efforts here, how this is going to affect you guys in that effort?
I'll defer to you.
Thanks. We brought Louis in from Toledo just a couple of months ago, and he's a little bit older than Warren was, and he was going to be our first breeder. But we anticipated that as Warren became more mature, that then he would eventually become our second breeder. So this really impacts not only us, but all the elephants in captivity in North America.
I know this is very early and probably premature, but is it likely that you may bring in another male in the future?
Well, as you know from covering the transport of Louis, it's a really huge undertaking, so probably not in the near future. Number one, we'd have to identify one and then go through all the hoops that we had to jump through to bring Louis here. So we'll probably have all of our eggs in one basket right now with counting on Louis to be our breeder.
Had he or any of the other elephants shown any odd effects to the anesthetizing process at all in the past?
We haven't seen any unusual secondary effects, either during the procedure or after the procedure. So the drug that we use is reversible. That means when we're done with what we have to do, we give them a different drug that reverses the effects so they wake up quickly. And we haven't seen any issues. In fact, in Swaziland, some of the immobilizations were very, very long, over 2 hours that we kept them down. This was a 20-minute procedure. So, and again, we just haven't seen problems. But broadly, anesthesia is a safe procedure, but there's always an element of risk. And so we go into it prepared, hopefully. We monitor carefully, but this was stunning.
Is the facility still closed, or will it be closed in the future?
The elephants are on display outside right now, and we may allow a little bit more time this evening, but I expect tomorrow that the inside and the outside will both be open to the public.
And Warren hadn't bothered any elephants yet?
No, he was too young.
Has the zoo ever experienced a loss like this before?
The last elephant we lost was almost 8 years ago, and that was an age-related issue.
But in this manner, no.
No.
Now, Warren hadn't been here that long, only a year and a half ago. You talked about the big personality. Can you tell us a little bit about Warren's personality?
Yeah, he was really kind of a favorite because he was a real toughie when he got here. You know, he acted like a big giant bull. You know, he was going to kick sand in your face, literally. He had a way of running up to the front of the enclosure and he would kick the sand of the display at you, especially me. I don't think he liked Doug much either. And that kind of endeared him to all of us because he acted so tough, but he was so small. But then as it turned out, we kind of anticipated that he would be a handful to train and work with. Turned out he was one of the fastest to pick up new behaviors and stuff, and the keepers really liked working with him, so he quickly became an employee and volunteer favorite. And I think some of the public were able to recognize him because of the little lump that he had on his ankle, so people knew who he was. They could pick him out from the other elephants, and so people knew him and liked him.
Do you suspect that this will affect the elephant's behavior for a while?
I do, because just like any other group of animals or people, you know, there's a pecking order, and you know, when you take somebody out of that group, then everybody kind of has to rearrange. And there was definitely, he had some relationships with Claire and Lolly that he used to spar with a lot, more so than the other animals. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're looking for him for the next few days at least.
And is there any type of emotional support for the elephants or anything to kind of make them?
Well, they have each other. You know, they are animal that lives in a large group, especially kind of ruled by the females, you know, matriarchal society. So they develop very close bonds with each other. So I suspect tonight we'll see, you know, more bonding, and I think they probably will be looking for him. And again, I think, you know, even though he's not in that spot anymore, we see it in the wild where elephants have died, that members of their family will come back even up to a year or 2 years later and go to that very spot and smell it. And we don't know if they're looking for that animal or if they're there to pay their tribute to that animal that died.
Will you be here at the zoo for the necropsy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then what happens after that?
Well, we've contacted the museum, see if he has educational value or research value for the museum, particularly in Nebraska. It's important because of our whole history with large mammals, prehistoric large mammals. And I haven't heard back from them. Otherwise, he'll be buried on zoo grounds.
Sorry, you said you reached out to who?
University of Nebraska at Lincoln.
Were there any alternates or alternatives to this procedure, anything that you could have done differently looking back?
So we actually had started a training procedure with him after we initially noticed cracks in his tusk. All the elephants have small cracks in their tusk. His cracks were bigger starting from the tip, and they were progressing. And so we started a training procedure with him. And in spite of the fact he was highly trainable, but he didn't like people messing with his tusks. And so they were making progress, and all the training programs are slow. It's incremental progress. And the cracks, unfortunately, were changing faster than we were making progress with the tusks. So our objective was to train him so he could do the molds. And then a few weeks later, when we had the caps built, to be able to put him on, but he just wasn't accepting the training fast enough for that. And we were worried that the cracks were going to get into the root canal.
This is something that you see in wild elephants as well. You'll see, especially in bulls that spar a lot, you'll see shorter tusk or broken tusk. But of course it can lead to death in the wild.
So we did have one of the previous bulls we had a similar thing had happened. He cracked a tusk and he got an infection. That was Perkins. And in fact, we did put him through multiple procedures to extract the tusks, and in the end, the infection, he did die of an infection associated with that. So it's a serious issue, and it was important we prevent it.
Does today's events change your approach for anesthetizing elephants in the future?
We'll first determine the cause of death, but we'll also meet with the crew. And most of the hospital crew is down there. We had 3 veterinarians, 3 technicians. We'll hold multiple meetings to reevaluate our procedures, see if there's something we should do different. But I'm confident at this stage that we were practicing high quality medicine. But anytime something like this happens, we always reevaluate and reassess. And we'll meet not only with the crew, the hospital crew, but the keeper crew, see if they observe anything different. Then we'll probably talk to some outside institutions and just see if anybody has any different ideas.
Will there be any sort of memorial service, memorial for Warren, anything like that?
There won't be a service per se, but if people want to post their pictures or comments about him on Facebook, or I think what we'll do in the viewing area in the barn, if people want to, kids want to draw a picture of him or, leave a flower or something in his name, we'll make that available.
How many people were present during the procedure or used during the procedure?
Well, there were around 15 people there. So we had 6 medical staff and multiple keeper staff, as well as some of our maintenance crew was there. They were helping make the mold that we needed to make. It was tough. There were at least 15 people there. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.